It was just another Friday afternoon, and Ben Tennyson was holed up in his room the way he usually was after school. A stack of comic books leaned against the wall. His video game console blinked idly, and the hum of the ceiling fan filled the silence. He lay across his bed, sneakers still on, flicking through channels with no real interest. The Omnitrix rested on his wrist, glowing faintly as if waiting for something, though Ben tried to ignore it. To him, it was just another normal day. For now, bored out of his mind, Ben finally rolled off his bed and wandered into the kitchen. His parents were at the table, chatting casually, but stopped when they saw him. "Your grandpa's coming over tonight," his dad said. Ben's face lit up instantly. "Yes," he shouted, pumping his fist. "And your cousin Gwen, too," his mom added. Ben froze mid-celebration, his grin collapsing. "Dang," he muttered, dragging out the word as if it hurt to say. Ben pushed open the front door and stepped outside. The air had a cool edge to it, a reminder that summer was well and truly over. He kicked at the grass as he crossed the yard, finally settling under the old oak tree out front. Leaning back against the trunk, he let out a long sigh, trying not to think about Gwen tagging along. His eyes wandered up and down the street, searching for the one thing that could save him from boredom. Grandpa Max's beat-up old RV. Any minute now it would roll around the corner, and with it, adventure. Ben's eyes lit up as soon as he saw the familiar shape of Grandpa Max's RV turning the corner. He scrambled to his feet and gave a small, enthusiastic wave through the window. Inside, Grandpa Max waved back, a grin spreading across his face. But Gwen. Somehow, she was already looking disappointed. Arms crossed, she shot Ben a glare that said, "I can't believe I have to deal with you again." The RV rumbled down the driveway and came to a stop. Grandpa Max swung open the door first, followed by Gwen, who already looked like she'd spotted every possible reason to roll her eyes at Ben. "Hey, Ben!" Grandpa Max greeted warmly, pulling him into a big hug. "You excited for a crazy weekend?" "Oh, yeah," Ben said enthusiastically, grinning from ear to ear. Gwen crossed her arms and smirked. "Some of us don't share your definition of crazy," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Grandpa Max headed inside to talk with Ben's parents, leaving Ben and Gwen alone in the driveway. Gwen tilted her head, arms crossed, and gave him a sly smirk. "You really are naive. And cute, Ben. You think we're going on some big adventure." Ben's grin faltered slightly. "In reality," Gwen continued, "your parents just want to get rid of you for the weekend. Can't blame them, considering how annoying you can be." Ben let out a long sigh and ignored her. Wandering into the RV, he started rifling through the cabinets, hunting for snacks, and finally grabbed a handful of something that looked promising. He popped it into his mouth and immediately spat it out. "Ugh, what is that?" he groaned, making a disgusted face. Gwen, leaning against the doorway, laughed. "What on earth is wrong with you?" she asked, shaking her head. "Those treats are for dogs," Gwen said, still laughing. Ben's face twisted in disgust. "I didn't even know Grandpa had a dog." Gwen rolled her eyes. "They're not for a dog. Grandpa Max likes them." Ben stared at the snacks for a long moment, then slowly shook his head. "Ew. No way." Ben stepped out of the RV, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, I guess I better pack for the weekend," he said, trying to sound responsible. Gwen smirked, finally admitting you need more than snacks. Ben just grinned and shook his head. Ben rushed up to his room, frantically shoving clothes, gadgets, and random odds and ends into his school backpack. Socks tumbled to the floor, comic books teetered on the edge of the desk, and a half-eaten sandwich somehow ended up in the pile. "All right, adventure, here I come," Ben muttered to himself, zipping the bag closed despite the chaos spilling out the sides. Ben raced down the stairs, backpack bouncing on his shoulders. "Ready to go," he shouted. "Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad." Before they could answer, he dashed back out to the RV, full of excitement, eager to start the weekend. Ben climbed into the RV, plopping down into the front passenger seat. Gwen was nearby, arms crossed, watching with her usual skeptical expression. Grandpa Max stepped out of the house, gave a wave, and climbed into the driver's seat. "All ready," he called. "Woo!" Ben yelled, punching the air. The engine roared to life, and with a rumble and a few squeals of tires, they were on the road, the weekend officially underway. Ben leaned back in his seat, staring out the RV window at the busy Friday afternoon in Bellwood. People bustled along the sidewalks, cars honked in the streets, and the usual suburban chaos unfolded. Gwen sat nearby, headphones in, absorbed in her book, completely ignoring the world around her. Before long, the urban and suburban chaos of Bellwood faded behind them. Rolling green fields stretched out as far as the eye could see, dotted with sparkling lakes that caught the afternoon sun. Pine forests rose in the distance, their dark green needles swaying gently in the breeze. The hum of the RV and the soft rustle of trees replaced the city noise, signaling that the weekend adventure was really beginning. Ben turned toward Grandpa Max, curiosity written all over his face. "Where are we actually going, Grandpa?" "You'll love it," Grandpa Max said with a grin. "A little campsite in the woods, somewhere I used to camp when I was your age." Ben's eyes lit up. A weekend in the woods, just like Grandpa had done as a kid, sounded like the perfect escape from the usual chaos of Bellwood. Ben turned toward Gwen, excitement in his voice. "Hear that? We're going into the woods." Gwen, headphones still in, gave a brief nod. "Yeah, cool. Whatever," she muttered, clearly not sharing Ben's enthusiasm. Ben sat in the RV bored, fiddling with the Omnitrix. Grandpa Max glanced over with a knowing smile. "Don't worry, Ben. No alien threats where we're going. You won't have to go hero this weekend." Ben looked up, trying to sound nonchalant. "Yeah, sure," he said, though a small part of him couldn't help feeling a little disappointed. About 2 hours later, the RV turned onto a narrow, forested road. "This is it," Grandpa Max announced with a grin. Gwen pulled her headphones off and peered out the window. Ben, half asleep from the drive, slowly stirred, blinking at the passing trees. As they drove further up the road, a wooden sign came into view. "Campground 500M." They pulled up to the campground. It was empty, but surprisingly well-maintained, with clean cabins and bathroom facilities. Grandpa Max stepped out first, stretching his arms. Ben and Gwen followed, the fresh scent of pine filling their lungs, carried on a gentle breeze. Ben shivered and grabbed a jacket. "Whoa, it's colder than I thought," he said. Nearby, a park ranger started walking toward them, purpose in his stride. "Hey folks, I'm just gonna warn you now, we've had a massive raccoon infestation. Keep an eye out, okay?" Grandpa Max chuckled. "Huh. Why is no one else around?" "Like I said," the ranger replied, pointing toward the trees, "the raccoons." Gwen wrinkled her nose in disgust. "You. Gross." Suddenly, the park ranger shouted, startling them. "See right there." They caught a glimpse of a raccoon darting into the bushes. Without missing a beat, the ranger took off after it, leaving Ben and Gwen standing there, exchanging confused looks. "Okay, I'm going to take a shower," Grandpa Max said with a grin. "You two can look around. There's a big lake just down that way." With a nod, they parted ways. Ben and Gwen began walking toward the lake, the crisp forest air filling their lungs. It was bigger than either of them had expected, the water sparkling in the dimming afternoon sunlight. A small dock jutted out, partly collapsing into the water. Gwen stepped in, ankle-deep, staring out across the lake. Ben crouched by the shore, tossing stones, trying to make them skip. "How are you going to cope, Ben?" Gwen asked. "You can't go, hero. This isn't like our usual summer vacation with Grandpa." Ben grinned mischievously. "I could go, hero, and, eradicate those raccoons." Gwen shot him an annoyed look. "A raccoon is hardly a reason to go, hero. Can't you just be a normal kid for once?" Gwen lectured, hands on her hips. No," Ben replied with a grin. He spotted the largest rock he could find, picked it up, and hurled it into the water, splashing Gwen from head to toe. Ben, grow up," Gwen yelled, dripping wet and glaring at him. Ben just laughed, wiping water from his face. "Hey, normal is boring." Gwen stomped back toward the campsite, water dripping from her clothes, with Ben trudging behind, still grinning. Grandpa Max was already at the campsite, moving around with purpose, collecting branches for a fire. "All right, you two, follow my lead," he called. "We need enough for a proper fire tonight." Gwen and Ben began scouring the area, picking up fallen branches and small logs to add to the fire pit. The fresh pine scent filling the air as they worked. The sky had grown dark, and a big pile of branches now sat neatly next to the fire pit. Grandpa Max struck a match on his carefully constructed teepee of wood, and flames sprang to life, sending warmth into the cool evening air. Gwen and Ben sat around the fire, Ben holding his hands out to soak in the heat. Grandpa Max disappeared into the RV for a moment and returned with burgers and his homemade grill. He carefully set the grill atop the fire. "Yes, burgers!" Ben exclaimed, eyes wide with excitement. Gwen smirked at Ben, who was fidgeting by the fire. "Looks like someone hasn't had their ADHD pills today." Ben blinked at her. "My what?" Grandpa Max just raised an eyebrow and said, "Campfire song time." Grandpa Max exclaimed, a wide grin on his face. "Yeah, Ben, how about we hear that lovely voice of yours?" Gwen added, smiling mischievously. "You wish," Ben muttered, rolling his eyes. Before either of them could protest further, Grandpa Max started clapping and singing a generic campfire tune, loud and enthusiastic. Ben and Gwen exchanged a look, both cringing slightly as the song filled the night air. Gwen and Ben clapped along unenthusiastically to Grandpa Max's campfire song. Suddenly, Ben perked up. "Hey, the food looks ready." Grandpa Max grabbed the tongs and headed over. Ben and Gwen sat by the fire, each holding a plastic plate with a bun roll. Grandpa Max plopped a sizzling burger onto each plate and offered some salad on the side. Ben shook his head and made a face. "Yuck," he muttered, pushing the salad away. Gwen, on the other hand, happily filled her plate with salad, smiling at Ben's reaction. They were all enjoying their food when, suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. The park ranger from earlier walked up to the camp, startling them slightly. "Hi, y'all," he said. "How's it going?" Grandpa Max smiled politely. "No problems." "Nah, no problems. All good," the ranger replied, then fell silent, just standing there for a moment. Finally, he spoke again, looking up at the sky. "Look, I'm not really a camp ranger. Well, not anymore. My wife divorced me. I've been gambling a lot. I'm actually homeless right now." Grandpa Max looked shocked. "I'm sorry to hear that." Ben and Gwen exchanged equally confused glances. The ranger continued, "Look, if you could spare maybe $20. Grandpa Max nodded. "Yeah, sure," and walked to the RV, pulling out $10. The ranger, standing alone with Ben and Gwen, asked, "Hey, kids. Doing all right? Enjoying your food?" "Yeah, good," Ben said, while Gwen just nodded. Grandpa Max returned to the fire. "All I've got is 10. "Thank you. Thank you," the ranger said, then wandered off into the night. Gwen shook her head. That was weird. About half an hour passed, and they were just sitting around the fire, making idle chat about school, summer plans, and random stories. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed from the RV. Everyone jumped to their feet, hearts racing. The window had been smashed. Through the shadows, they caught a glimpse of the park ranger sprinting into the woods. "That's what you get," he yelled over his shoulder, disappearing into the trees. "That's it. I'm going hero," Ben shouted, leaping to his feet. "No, Ben," Grandpa Max said firmly, holding him back. "Why would he do this?" Gwen asked, her voice trembling slightly as they walked toward the RV and saw the large hole in the window. Grandpa Max shook his head, hand on his chin, clearly baffled. "What in the world?" he muttered. Gwen carefully opened the RV door. "Watch for glass," Grandpa warned, eyes scanning the shattered window frame. Ben, however, was already staring intently in the direction the ranger had run. Suddenly, Gwen screamed at the top of her lungs and bolted from the RV. Ben spun around just in time to see raccoons everywhere. The park ranger had thrown a garbage bag, full of them, into the RV. The little animals were scurrying over the seats, scrambling across the floor, and wreaking chaos. Grandpa Max grabbed a broom from the RV and started swinging it gently, trying to herd the raccoons toward the open door. "Out! Out of here!" he shouted, shooing them with quick sweeps of the broom. The raccoons squeaked and scrambled, leaping over seats and scattering across the floor. Slowly, one by one, Grandpa managed to chase them out into the night. Ben and Gwen stood at the door, wide-eyed and shaking their heads. "That was insane," Gwen muttered. Ben, fists clenched, looked toward the woods where the ranger had disappeared. "No way. I'm going hero next time," he muttered through gritted teeth. "I think we better go home," Grandpa Max said, his voice firm but calm. Ben's shoulders slumped, his face showing extreme disappointment. Gwen nodded quietly, agreeing with her grandfather. They doused the campfire with water, making sure every ember was out, and packed their things back into the RV. The night had grown late, the forest eerily quiet around them. "I'm sorry, Ben," Grandpa Max said softly. "I don't think it's safe here." Ben's eyes welled up, almost tearing from the sting of disappointment. Grandpa Max started the RV, the engine rumbling to life, as Ben stared out the window, silently wishing the weekend could have gone differently. Ben slumped in his seat, staring out the window at the dark silhouettes of pine trees against the starry sky. Gwen was asleep in the back of the RV, headphones still on. "Maybe we'll try again next week." "Somewhere else," Grandpa Max said softly to Ben. Ben remained silent, lost in his thoughts. The distant lights of Bellwood gradually came into view. Soon, the RV rolled up the driveway of Ben's house. "Well, try to enjoy your weekend, Ben," Grandpa Max said with a small smile. Ben leapt from his seat and hugged his grandfather tightly. "Thanks, Grandpa," he whispered, then stepped back and waved as the RV drove off down the road. He trudged inside the quiet house, tired as ever, and collapsed into his bed, finally letting sleep take over.